Those companies who's saying remote okay, but like only hiring within US, we really should talk about these companies because they are the early adopters. They're the people who's like, okay, we want to be remote because that's our core company value, but let's stick to US first. They have some knowledge gap. They don't yet realize the talent across the world is equivalent or better than the talent that they can find in the US.
Paul Xue, welcome to Ship It and Sip It. I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm so glad to talk about hiring global talent on the show today. You said in a tweet earlier this week that you've been researching this topic for the last couple months. I'm curious, what got you interested in hiring global talent? Why have you been looking into it?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, John. It's a pleasure to be here. So the reason why I started looking into hiring global talent is because I'm seeing a fundamental shift for companies, especially in the North American market and Europe market, opening up their possibilities and opening up their thinkings to look for talents that's widely available in other parts of the world, such as West Africa, Latin America, and also Southeast Asia or South Asia included. First of all, because the talent pool across globally has risen up dramatically over the past few years. Second of all, they're still quite relatively cheaper than North American or even the European market. So I want to be positioned in a way that as a CTO, I have the intricate knowledge to help other companies or help myself hire global talent.
Awesome. Well, this is a perfect topic for the show. Hopefully, a lot of the founders that listen to us will learn a little bit more about hiring for their teams and whether it's the right choice for them. All right. The first question I thought of when I started outlining this topic went sort of straight into the deep end, but maybe it's a little bit old school. Maybe it's a little stereotypical. Yeah. But for a long time, I had this feeling that business owners and founders took a certain pride in employing locally, building a workforce that, gives back to the community they're part of. How does hiring globally sort of change this dynamic? And is there still space left for those founders who want to be seen as sort of a community business owner leader?
Such a great question. So I was one of those people who, when I first started in my career, I wanted people around myself. If I was going to hire a big team, say like 10, 20 people, I wanted to be all in office, right, in the same city so that we can grow, we can build, we can share wins and fails together. Well, first of all, we had an event called the pandemic. Vastly, completely changed the way that people worked, right? Remote was a widely common thing. We completely shifted away from office into remote, working from home. So that kind of was the cataclysm for the shift in, including myself, the way that I thought about how to find talent anywhere really across the world. It doesn't have to be in Canada. The second thing is, honestly, the talent that's available globally has risen so much that it doesn't make a whole lot of business sense for you to keep holding on to the old school thought that you must hire local. Even though that there are benefits that comes with working with people locally in the office, I still really like the concept of in-person collaboration. But on the wider sense of things, for you to be a thoughtful leader for yourself, for your work, for your business, and for mentorship as a whole, it just makes a lot more sense for you to look everywhere instead of just locally nowadays.
Okay. You've mentioned a couple times there the different reasons why, but before we get into too much of it, what are some more of the benefits of why should founders be looking at hiring globally?
Yeah. So, I mean, as a business owner, your cost and margin is probably one of the most important things. The cost effectiveness and the level of quality talent is the primary reason Like I can find a good senior developer, let's say in West Africa or South Asia, for half of the or less than half of the price in North America. I know it sounds a little bit exploitative, but it's a negotiation, right? Like if the people are willing to work and they're comfortable in negotiating these kind of salary compensations, then yeah, I will look for talents in these areas. The second thing is, these new areas, their communication skills are rapidly rising, and it feels good to mentor developers in these areas and to teach them the ways that North America has gotten used to, and maybe slowly starting to reject a lot of these core values that we had as a business owner. So I'm honestly, it's a both monetary and also philosophical alignment nowadays.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective on it. And you've mentioned now developers a couple times,
Yeah,
and as a CTO, that makes sense.
yeah.
But as this trend has grown, were there any roles that you found were going remote or going global that really surprised you?
Oh, hmm. I don't think so. I think it's so developers, like senior level developers, is actually the most surprising thing to me because, as a CTO, I still held on the belief that, North American developers are still the best. We were more senior because we graduated from more like better schools, let's say. We have these startup or FANG level experiences. But gradually in the past couple years, I don't believe in that anymore. I think, especially people in Eastern Europe are equivalent or better than a lot of these senior level developers here.
That's really interesting. Where do you? This might sound stupid, but where do you think that increase in skill sort of came from? Was that just people teaching themselves via YouTube and courses? Was it founders going to San Francisco and coming back and building sort of US style companies in
Mm,
their home cities, which we've seen quite a bit off and
mm,
on? What were some of the factors there in terms of raising that skill level?
mm. So I think the skill level has already been there for years, let's say almost a decade. Uh, Founders coming back to those countries is a good reason. I think the primary reason just the massive increase in communication skills. Like language has always been a barrier, but now people in South Asia, Southeast Asia speak perfectly fluent English now. Even people in West Africa, Eastern Europe included. So it's just much easier to communicate with these developers in these different geolocations that have great written communication skills, that have great verbal skills as well. The fact that we're on this podcast speaking English is a testament to that.
Yeah, for sure. And there's been a sort of narrative ever since the pandemic kind of wound down that, a lot of bigger companies want people to come back to the office. But I did
Mm,
some research while I was making this outline, and remote job postings are actually going back up again
yeah,
slightly.
correct.
So, who do you think? What type of companies, if it's not the big tech companies that are trying to get everybody back into the office, where are these
Yeah.
roles coming from?
So you got it right. There's a two opposing forces here. The big companies, being the fan level companies, they are a immovable, cruise ship going towards their own directions. They have a gravitational pull and they have the resources, backings to pull people back towards their offices, towards their centralized locations like San Francisco and the Bay Area. That's probably not going to change, right? They still pay the highest salaries. They have the prestige. They have the San Francisco Bay Area behind them. But as you saw during and after the pandemic, people are looking for other options, right? Whether if they're being burnt out, whether if they don't believe in the in office 5 days a week program anymore, people are looking for options. So that's what these let's say, smaller startups or even non-fan level, let's call it, tech companies are okay with. They're hiring global talents, allowing to be completely remote, and that's the way the other ships are going.
Right on. And on your pinned tweet on Twitter, I found a lovely story you wrote
Yeah,
about
nice.
how you got interested in technology, how you were in high school and you made this computer club with the big purple iMacs with all your friends and
You
played
got it.
computer games, right? Everybody go check it out. It's a great little short story about Paul's history. But the reason I bring it up is because you write a lot about the importance and the impact of that community. And I
Yes.
want to connect that to this trend that we're talking about now. How do you take that room full of, nerdy, fun loving computer guys and have the same values or the same culture on a global team?
Yeah, yeah. So at the core of every community, there needs to be a mission, like something that everyone is working towards. I'm going to probably lose some people here, but I'm a big video gamer when I grew up, especially with online games. I played a lot of World of Warcraft. It's part of the story on my pin tweet. And I remember very clearly, the point of playing these games with tens and thousands of people online is to not play it alone, to join a something called a guild, which is essentially a company or a community, and you all collaborate with each other. Everybody brings a different skill or talent or ability to this community, and you all have missions, which is tackle big boss or tackle big missions, quests together. So, you know, from a very early on age, I've gotten a taste of this, right? I spent countless hours. I spent hundreds of hours playing these games, being part of these communities. So I know how it feels like. I know how to organize them, and I've been leaders of these community from as a 13, 14-year-old Paul all the way through to my early 20s. And as life goes on, I kind of gave that up, but I've been more or less chasing that same community feel for most of my adulthood so far. Startups used to kind of give off that feeling of community where you're chasing towards the same mission, but it just didn't have the same fun feel as the community that I created or joined back when I was a teenager. So there must be some secret sauce that we can marry the two together. That's something that I'm actively looking for as well.
Really interesting. Yeah. Let's see. Let's talk about when founders should look at hiring remote, hiring abroad.
Right.
If we think about your typical product founder or founders, they're working on their MVP, they launch it, maybe they're getting revenue, maybe they're fundraising, and they're looking
Mm.
to expand the team. What should their plan be in terms of growing the team? And should they immediately have a plan to grow with a global team? Should they immediately set like a core team and then
Yeah.
expand? What are your thoughts there?
So I at these days, if you are a small startup that's just, let's say, raising your seed round, it is a preferential thing. You can, like, again, if you buy into the San Francisco Bay Area philosophy, then yeah, hire locally. It's completely up to you. But if you want to instill that remote first philosophy into your company and embed that as your company culture, you really need to do it and embrace it from day one. The worst outcome is you kind of half and half it. Let's say you say you remotely hire, but then you also don't put the resource or the effort behind in making that into a success. I see companies fail when they don't use the right tools, when they don't put the resources, they don't have the culture, they still work together synchronously, even though that they're remote, mandating people to have core office hours, right? Everybody to be online within these set core office hours, even though that people are across like 12 different time zones. So that's these kind of thing bumps against each other and needs to be sorted out from day one. There's no other way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't have this in the outline, but maybe I'm putting you on the spot. Can you
Sure.
think of any really good sort of open to the public, build in public examples that founders could look at, or of founders who are doing this? And the first one that springs to mind, I think, is the guy from Gumroad, SHL, Sahil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you.
I mean, he's got
So
this whole structure set up with the way his payment works. He's made his own product to manage it all. That's the first one I thought of. But are there any others that you can think of?
I can't think of any other better example than the one that you mentioned, Gumroad. There are so many great remote first companies out there. I'm sure a quick Google search can lend you all the results.
All right. You touched on this a little bit with that last answer, but how should these roles be structured? It feels like there are a lot more different ways to do this now, and it could be pretty confusing. A lot of the US based companies are hiring remote, but listing it as a remote within the US,
Yeah,
right? That's
yeah,
like, according to the survey I saw, that's like 75% of the
yeah,
remote listings are like that. So we're not going to talk about them, I don't think. But if you're looking to hire outside of your own country, should it be a full-time employee? Should it be a contractor? Should it be a freelancer for one-off, freelancer on retainers? There's so many different ways to do this.
yeah. So I'm actually going to push against that, right? For those companies who's saying remote, okay, but like only hiring within US, we really should talk about these companies because they are the early adopters of this trend. Let's say, right? They're the people who's like, okay, we want to be embracing remote because that's like some part of our core company value, but let's stick to US first because they have some knowledge gap that they don't yet realize the talent across the world is equivalent or better than the talent that they can find in the US. Obviously, if there are some security concerns with data not being able to leave the US soil, then yes, that is a valid reason. But outside of that, there's so much tooling nowadays and support for companies to hire remotely that there really isn't any legal or sorry, not legal, contractual or financial constraints to stop a company from hiring globally.
All right.
Um,
And the second part of that question,
yeah,
what types of employment structures should they look at?
yeah. So really, there's only kind of two differences. The two differences is if you're going to be hired as an individual or if you're going to be hired as a subsidiary of the company itself in a remote location. Full time or not, that kind of falls under the second category of if the company has established an entity in your home country, then most likely you will be hired as a full time employee with the benefits. With benefits, that is a little bit more complicated and more costly. But there are services out there that helps you hire an entire team. It's just depending on your skills. Do you want me to get into like some of the tools or things that
Yeah,
you can
sure.
use?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay,
let's talk about it.
sure, yeah. So for the team oriented hiring, which means that as a company, like for myself, I would either contract these companies to set up an entity for me in these remote regions, or I hire a team of people through them. So there's companies like A Team, TCS. These companies basically help you hire based on a team of people.
Hmm.
There are also in talks with a plethora of different staffing agencies, let's say. They might not be the right word, but they basically have a presence in North America, but they have a core team of developers in overseas where you can hire on a team basis. They would
Hmm.
most likely get the benefits because they're hired as full time employees.
Yeah, yeah.
On the other side, you can hire individuals across the world. Most likely, they will be hired as a contractor. You can use tools like Dio, you can use tools like Topto and Turing. These are like amazing tools for you to essentially manage all of your HR complexities and also financial complexities, like how to pay people.
Right.
Moving money across the world is actually a fairly complicated business. So yeah, these tools basically solve all of these problems for you.
Really cool. And yeah, just shoot me some of those links and I'll put them in the show notes for people to check
For
out.
sure.
All right. This is something that I've heard from founders that work for or work with Paralect as well, off and on. And it's sort of a stereotype that people have about working with offshore agencies or
Yeah.
developers. It is if they're trying to fundraise, then investors don't want to see these types of team structures in the company.
Right.
Is
Right.
that is that an old wives' tale? Are investors changing their mind about that?
So investors is investors, right? Like as a founder, that's something that I always um struggles with is okay, so you've invested money in our company. How much advice or how much advice should I take from you? Like investors don't know everything, of course, right? That's why they're investors. If they know everything, they would be a founder themselves. So at the end of the day, as a founder, you just have to do what's right for your company, regardless of what your investors or anywhere else says.
For sure. Um, I guess, do you have any ideas of how founders can tell this story? You know, they're out there pitching and there's the team deck, right?
Yeah,
Everybody's got a team deck. How can they tell the story or sell the story of the positive characteristics of having a global
yeah.
team to the investors?
Show the results, show the cost savings. Like at the end of the day, investors will invest in a successful, profitable business.
Mhm.
If you can show the results of the great product that you're building or have built utilizing these amazing global talents, and show them the cost that you built it with.
Right on. We already talked about some of the tools you mentioned. I had a question, and you mentioned time zones earlier. What are
Mhm.
some strategies for sort of getting around that? Is it building your development team to be as asynchronous as possible in terms of communication? Do you have any other insights there?
Yeah, so it goes back into what I said about embracing remote first from day one. Everything has to be async. Like unless you're saying, okay, we're only going to hire within plus four of our own time zones, right? Like there are companies that says, okay, we're based on the East Coast, we're only going to hire, plus, UTC to like UTC minus eight, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Like you can create that range of buffer, but if you truly go remote, or either way, you need to go asynchronous first, where in-person meetings, face-to-face meetings happen very rarely. All the decisions are communicated asynchronously, and people are being blocked asynchronously. The worst is when someone wakes up and then they realize that they can't do anything until somebody else on the other side of the world gets online.
Mhm.
These frictions needs to be solved from a very, very early.
Yeah, that makes sense. We already talked a little bit about sort of deciding to go all in on totally remote, but
Yeah.
is there any reason for, say, a core team to be in one place, whether it's the C level, whether it's four founders together with a couple managers? Is there any any rationale for that type
Mhm.
of setup
Yeah.
that then supports a more global team for the
Yeah.
startup?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, hiring is a scaling activity. So, regardless if you're hiring locally or globally, hiring is when you want to scale. You've already figured some core secret out that your product is maybe just reaching product market fit, or your product has seen some early success, with the core team, and now you need to rapidly scale up your talent pool to support the scale. So that 0 to 1 activity where you're just building an MVP or you're just figuring out that secret sauce with your product, that absolutely can be accomplished by a core team all sitting around in the same room, in the same garage, whatever you want to organize it. So I actually personally prefer that, right? At the very early, maybe the first 6 months of your product existence, I would love to just work shoulder by shoulder with my co-founders and the early engineers.
Right on. All right, let's move on to some of the things that can go wrong, or some of the things that stop people from taking this approach. And the first obvious thing to me was sort of logistical blockers in terms of finances and taxes. So you mentioned some tools already, but are there any other insights you want to add there?
Yes. So really, the core decisions is if you want to hire people as a full-time employee or as a contractor, that's the decision that you need to make. If you hire people long-term, like years, it's still highly recommended to hire them as a full-time employee or go through an agency that hires these people as full-times, right? It gives people a sense of security that they're not always worried about if they will have a contract or not in the next 6 months. It gives the people a sense of security so that they can invest into your product better as a remote worker. If you decide to hire individuals as contractors, then there's a plethora of tools out there that helps you manage HR, manage contracts, and manage how to payments. So these are like kind of the two core decisions that you have to make. Personally, I see the most rewarding is to hire based on a team, whether it's you setting up a team yourself or going through an agency that has a team and hiring building a relationship with the agency across a long term. I highly recommend that.
Yeah, we do too. All right. One of the questions under your tweet earlier this week, I stole it and put it in our outline. What's your position on salary benchmarking for global workers?
Yeah, so the wider question there, I believe, is how do you build trust with the talent locally so that you can compensate them fairly and they can feel as if they're compensated fairly. The real answer, or the way that I've been approaching this, is by creating genuine relationships and partnering with local people who understand the local market and can give me or catch me up rapidly with the knowledge of how to compensate across the world. At the end of the day, most likely that's the only way, unless you have boots on the ground, unless you personally go visit Eastern Europe or you personally going to Southeast Asia and live there for a few months and actually gaining this insider knowledge. There's really no way for you to do that until you rely on someone that's local.
Yep. Let's see. Speaking of going and living there, let's pivot a little bit into the cultural side of things.
Yeah.
One of the other questions under your tweet was, how do you screen for cultural fit when hiring from faraway places?
Yeah. So that's a really tough question, actually. I do personally believe that culture fit is much more important than the technical know-how. At the core, each company needs to have a clear mission, or at least that all successful companies can easily verbalize a mission statement. You need to hire people or partner up with agencies that share your core mission value. You can communicate this mission easily, and then they can communicate it back to you easily any given moment. Once you align on this core mission, you will automatically attract people that's the right culture fit. I believe that fundamentally. And a lot of founders, maybe they jump into hiring, maybe they jump into scaling without defining this core mission statement. Or even though that they define a mission statement, they don't truly believe it in it themselves, so that it comes across as flimsy and just on paper. So like as a founder, you really need to hammer down, or you need to solidify this core mission statement and find people who align with it.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add there is I think this is where having a founder or team of founders or leaders in the company be pretty vocal, opinionated,
Yeah,
authentic on social media can actually do a lot of this screening for you,
yeah,
because you're going to attract people that want to be part of that mission. Like going back to our earlier example of SHL from Gumroad, I mean, whenever he posts a position, he has no problem filling it. And I think those people are willing to, I don't know what they're willing to do for him, but it's a lot, right?
exactly,
And they
exactly.
buy in. They already buy into his story and Gumroad's mission completely because they've been reading about it. They've been following it. All right. So, but that first screening is sort of gets people in the door. But as the company grows,
Mm.
how can the culture will grow with it. The culture may change over time. How can founders sort of make sure that this global team that's growing continues to grow in the direction that they
Yeah,
have in mind?
yeah. So if you're like a mid-tier company with hundreds of people, really the only way for you to maintain the right culture is rely on the people that you hire, to hire people that's aligned, right? Founders at the top can only set the tone so much, as that, they can hold town halls and just like reiterate, this is our culture, this is our mission. But it's up to the people. If your managers don't buy into this and they're hiring people who's misaligned with their culture, then everything's moot. Hire good people, trust them to hire the right people for you.
Yeah, and in terms of that growing company, when you have a global team, how can workers in that team think about career growth from their side?
Mm,
Are there the same opportunities for them to progress? Say they're an engineer and they want to progress into engineering management. They want to
yeah,
be a CTO someday, like you.
yeah,
Are those opportunities the same? Are they different? Should the workers think about them differently? Should the founders and managers think
yeah.
about them differently?
That's the $1 million question, and that's what kind of gets me excited that we're talking about this. Is that how do we give people across the world the same exact opportunities career wise as people in North America and Europe? I don't have the answer, but I'm really excited to find out.
All right. Right. Let's get into sort of building products within a team like this. So, aside from paying people and hiring people legally, we've dealt with that. Let's talk about getting the software development done or getting shit done. You mentioned people getting blocked by people in different time zones, relying on
Mm.
other people to unblock them. But aside from that, what other blockers can stop teams, and what can founders do to make sure it doesn't happen?
Yeah, I think really is the core of it is the standard that everybody adheres to, whether it's a design standard, coding standard, whatever it is. What this means is onboarding for a global team will become extremely important. Whether it means you're creating material in different languages, or you're creating material that can be consumed quickly by people all across the world, that is that is a huge challenge. I don't have the answers because I haven't done this before, but these are the things that I highly recommend CTOs across the world to think about: is how do you onboard engineers, designers, talent across the world, across different cultures, right? At a micro scale, as like, these are the problems that companies of 1,000 people plus or 10,000 people like Amazon's tried to solve. But increasingly it might be problems that a startup of 10 needs to solve. And I hope that people are building tools around this. Maybe agencies like Parallel can help companies solve as a service. That gets me really excited because that unlocks even more talent across the world from day one. So good onboarding, rapid alignment of standards in a company for these remote talents, and then a continuous understanding of how to communicate and unblock each other on a daily basis is super.
Interesting. Yeah. And that, for some reason, I thought of another problem that seems to be plaguing
Mm,
in terms of hiring and weeding through applicants. We've got, from what I've read, I haven't applied to any roles or hired for any roles, but from what
yeah.
I've read, there's just thousands and thousands and thousands of applicants, a lot of bad AI resumes being flooded
Oh,
towards
yeah.
roles. And then we're using AI to read through those applications. So, any advice there? Any thoughts on how to solve this? I think, going global only opens that up to more, right?
I personally think we're at the stage of it's going to get worse before it gets better. We're at the worst stage, right? The global talent is just coming online. They've realized that company is opening up the doors to hire people as individuals, as a team, whatever it is, across the world off of platforms like Fiverr and Upwork. So now they're just rushing in to fill the gap with AI generated resumes, you know, whatnot. If you're going to worry about this and if you're going to let this turn you away from hiring globally, I think you're going to wake up 2 years down the road and completely missing the entire boat, miss the entire boat. These resumes is just a symptom of a knowledge gap between the workers in these remote regions. The knowledge being they don't know what managers in North America or Western Europe want, right? Nobody has ever sat down with them one on one and say, hey, look, these are the things we want. Uh, you know, don't use AI generated content. Just like give us to us straight. You will find jobs, right? Whether it's junior developer, junior designer, whatnot. And as they improve their skills and as they improve their knowledge, their resumes will get better in 2 3 years of time. I'm sure the signal to noise ratio will dramatically improve. But again, yes, that is a problem right now. The way for you to do it is just partner up again with agencies that already knows how to vet people locally, vet the local talent, and just rely on them.
All right, that makes sense. Let's see. In terms of technology that makes all this work happen, there are tons of tools. And I guess there is a real risk of teams sort of subscribing to way too many. I can think of, you know,
Yeah.
if you've got Docs in Notion, you've got Docs in Google Docs, you've got Docs everywhere outlining how you do things. It can get messy and it can cost you more
Yeah.
because all these tools cost money, right? So,
Yeah.
do you have any advice there about how to set up this stack of working remotely that makes sense, that makes it efficient, that doesn't cost the founders a ton of subscription fees every month?
Mm. That's something that I'm actively looking for, and I feel like this gets into a little bit of like heresy, where everybody is like, they're swear by their own tools. I mean, I use Notion personally, and I just dump everything into Notion. And the people that I collaborated with, also very small, which I've only collaborated with upwards to 6 people at the same time. Uh, find it okay, but I understand that if you don't manage the Notion database knowledge base properly, things will get everywhere. I used GitHub as well to kind of use the wiki and also the discussions. Plus, I heavily rely on code as documentation as a philosophy. I believe the best way to document things is directly where the documentation is needed. I subscribe to this philosophy. And for design wise, Figma is doing such a great job that I don't really believe you need any other tool to run your design department.
Awesome. All right. And how should, back to community a little bit, and then we'll wrap up. So,
Sure.
how should founders think about physical get-togethers, offsites, in real
Mm,
life
yeah.
connections with these teams? Should it be some sort of yearly tradition, some random thing that happens when there's a new round of funding or new milestone in terms of revenue? What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I love the concept of like big everybody get together once or twice a year events. But so like if that's available as an option for you to fly people to a centralized location, do it. Like there's uh nothing can replace that, right? Like all your entire company in a big room celebrating wins. But more importantly, I think, is for founders to celebrate small wins all the time, or even address small losses all the time. Just be like radically transparent, especially in a remote first workplace. It just like whenever you celebrate small wins or small losses, well, don't celebrate the small losses, but communicate the small losses. It just creates a sense of community and it just connects people and realigns on the mission statement. So really it's kind of like a combination of both. You need to be radically transparent with everybody and celebrate these wins all the time. Plus, if it's available, yeah, you should fly people in and celebrate it together.
Yeah, and I guess what do you think that looks like, other than sort of just I don't know, sending happy messages in Slack or a happy loom to the general chat? Like, are there creative ways you think that leaders can go beyond that and
Yeah.
really let people know?
Oh man, you're really trying to pull stuff out of me that's like I'm very opinionated in these things, right? Like the worst thing, I hate giving kudos. Like in the Silicon Valley, there's this concept of kudos, which is like you have this channel or you have this like thing where people thank each other and be like practice like gratitude. And it always boils down to like, oh, this guy helped me like click a button, or like this guy helped me realign a button today. Thank you, kudos. Like at the end of the day, look, it's about running experiments as a startup, as an early stage startup. It's about running experiments, okay, and then see if these experiments worked out or not. Every single day, every single week, every single sprint, month, year. If you can align your product building philosophy around running experiments, and then align these experiments with your mission statement, and then align your mission with your purpose as a entity, as a company, and then just radically celebrate wins or losses based on these experiments that you're running. That's all you need.
All right. Yeah, I don't want to push your buttons too much, but it's good. Thank you. Let's see. Last question for you, and then I'll give you space to raise any other perspectives that you'd like to share with folks. Most of this conversation has been from the founder leadership perspective, but if we look at the other side, if you want to share some ideas for a younger Paul who is eager to find a remote role in some team that he aspired to be in, some company or startup founder that he wanted to work with, what advice would you give him?
Yeah. Wow. Um, at the core, it's a knowledge problem. The knowledge problem being, I don't know what the global workers are looking for, and the global worker is, if you don't talk to me, you don't know what I'm thinking about, right? It's at the core, it's a business transaction, even though that like you know, yeah, it's a business transaction. So there are risks involved. If I'm hiring a person, individual person from from South Asia, there are risks involved. What if you turn out to not be everything that you said on your resume, or if you're not a culture fit? These are the things that I think about, and the only ways for you to know what I'm thinking about is by coming to talk to me, or talk to the many other founders that's actively online, that has a social presence, that's hanging out in Discord and Slack communities. So be proactive, put yourselves out there. That's basically what I did in my 20s. And then just start conversations with people who's willing to have a conversation with you, right? Like avoid the people who's looking down on you because of like where you are. If you're in West Africa, in Nigeria, I know that there are amazing talent there, and I would love to work with somebody from that area of the world. And if you, as a person, come up to me and say, "Hey, Paul, I'm so and so. I would love to collaborate with you. I'm based in Nigeria. Would you like to have a conversation?" I would love to talk to you and see where things go.
Yeah, yeah. Just as long as they don't use the word delve in their cold email, right?
or or hey, Paul, I'm a Nigerian prince. Could you?
Yeah. All right. On
Well,
that note,
well, we'll leave it at that. Like, I mean, these are the things that you need to like fight through. But
yeah,
like, look, that it's these are the things that like as a person in North America we make fun of. But like as a society, as like a business owner, that's where their opportunity is, right? Like the fact that we're making these kind of like side notes means that majority of people still think this way,
yeah.
right? Like when they think Nigeria, they think scams. Like I'm just being completely upfront. But the opportunity and the arbitrage opportunity here is yes, majority of people do think like this, and they're going to be the biggest losers in the next 10 years.
Right on. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for your time. Is there anything else that we skipped over that you'd like to share about what you researched in the last couple months about global hiring?
No, this was an amazing conversation, and I truly meant it when I say if you are a individual or agency owner in these remote regions and you see an opportunity to collaborate with somebody in North America, come find me, come talk to me.
Awesome. And I know I will put a link to your Twitter because that's where I follow most of your content. But are there any
Perfect.
other communities or things you've got going on
Yeah,
that you want people to know about?
yeah. So my Twitter is my primary social media handle. I also have a Discord community of agency owners. I'm starting to get really deep into partnering with agency owners all across the world. You know, so if you're interested, come find me on X. Let's have a conversation. I would love to have you in this Discord community as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for your time, Paul. It's been really enlightening. And yeah, I hope you have a lovely week, lovely weekend, and we'll get this out as soon as we can.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, John.